I know that most people do not like reading, and they probably don't like my face either. However, maybe hearing some of this information may be the catalyst of involving you to understand what you need to understand. I am going to be talking about servitude for natural life, basically slavery, um, and how at that time and kind of even now, uh, America thinks about us. Um, if you're able to work, they're going to put you to work. They might not give you the compensation that you want, but at this point, they cannot not give you compensation. But I want to discuss a couple of things, and hopefully, this is open for discussion at any time. I'm going to jump right into it. And I think I did this. Ooh, um, I think I wrote this poem, and then after the poem, um, there are a lot of things that are discussed. I'm hoping that you are able to hear what I'm saying and have a dialogue with anybody and everybody about this topic. Um, and again, I am not trying to go back and open up old wounds. These wounds have never healed. So maybe this will give you an explanation of certain things. Maybe this will help. Maybe you can actually teach someone else these things so that it will help them understand who they are and why they are. Um, yeah, I believe I wrote this and I started this as a poem, but it's Black History Month, and here it is that I'm gathering all this information for other purposes and not even sharing it, and I think that's uh, not right for me to do. I'm going to jump right in. Servitude for natural life. It's 1640. And my name is Mr. Punch, John Punch. And even though slavery is still alive and well, you saw the movie 12 Years a Slave. You watched that and it had a happy ending. Well, in 1640, and I am a slave. As a matter of fact, I am the first slave. Not in actuality, but as a matter of fact. I am the first slave on paper. What they have been doing, they being the white men, like all stories told by the victor, ends the way they want it to. Well, my story didn't end the way you think. I had to fight tooth and nail as they changed the laws and amendments, amended a few, as if my citizenship was different from theirs. As if the Constitution they thought of 138 years later did not pertain to me. It didn't. Lineage has always been claimed through the father, but as a slave, the Slave Act 7, no, 12, the black woman's children were counted to the condition of the mother. Mama's black, so I'm black. Master that raped her, that played games with her as property, black mothers killing babies, not having them end up as slaves. I've seen it all. And it's appalling, but civil, human. To save one by death. I fought in court for my freedom and lost. I was a free man, but I had to prove that to the courts. Elizabeth Freeman presented her case in court, and 98 years later, she won. She was blessed. Against the overwhelming restrictions, there were a number of court cases which slaves filed suit seeking their freedom, or freed Negroes claimed property had to be inherited from their former owners. Elizabeth Freeman, from 1732 to 34, all the way to 1829, she was a slave and presented her case for freedom in a Massachusetts court proceed in 1783, and she won. In addition, there was cases where slaves or free persons were the defendant. Celia, a slave, is a narrative account of such a trial in Missouri in 1855. White women were often involved in litigation concerning slaves, through the workings of the dower laws. In some states, women could inherit personally, but could only receive a life estate in real property. This situation created many problems, particularly if slaves were needed to profit from the land. So basically, it's saying that even if the master set me free as a slave, his wife would go and petition the courts so that I remain a slave as part of the land. Hmm. Hmm. This situation created many problems, particularly if the slaves were needed to make profits for the land. For example, if a woman chooses to free her personally at death, and inherit personally basically means slave at death, her descendants will have no one to work the land unless they farmed it with paid workers or purchased new slaves. Frequently, wills or contracts that granted freedom or conveyed realty or personality as dowers were contested in court. So if my master on his dying bed said, "Get the hell out of here, you're free, you and your family are free," after he's dead, his relatives have the right to go to court and contest my freedom. The Constitution of America, drafted in 1778, years after Negro John Punch, 1640. Virginia was one of the first states to acknowledge slavery in its laws, initially enacting such a law in 1671. The law reads that each woman servant got with child by her master shall, after her time by indentured or custom is expired, be by the church wardens of the parish where she lived when she was brought to bed of such bastard, sold for 2 years. So basically, it's saying that after her services at the plantation were over, then she had to serve 2 more years as a slave for the church. So Christianity knew about slavery and promoted it. Oh, it gets better. Great Britain had a very structured primogeniture system under which children always claim the lineage through the father, even those born without the legitimacy of marriage. Virginia was one of the first colonies to legislate a change. So basically, it's saying that if my father, whoever my father is, if my father is Puerto Rican, then I'm Puerto Rican. If he's white, then I'm white. If he's Haitian, then I'm Haitian. So whatever my father's blood is, regardless of how much of it's in my system, I am who my father is. But to have black people have rights, Virginia wasn't having it. Hmm. Negro women, children to serve according to the condition of the mother. After the slave trade officially ended, many slave owners tried to ensure that sufficient numbers of slaves were available to work their plantations. Slave women of childbearing age became more valuable. There are a number of court cases concerning slave women who either killed their masters for forcing them to have sexual relations or killed the children rather than to have the children enslaved. Oh, it's going to get, I'm going to be able to tell you why. So basically, America had changed the law so that the child was not able to get what was due because his father was white. If his father was white and he was a mulatto and he was born with a black mother, then he was able to get an inheritance. He was able to get a piece of the pie. But in Virginia, they were like, no, 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 no. So the law changed. Whatever my mama is, that's what I am. So that made the slaves, mulatto or otherwise, still slaves. If my mother is a slave and she's black, I'm considered black and I'm still a slave. Even though my daddy is white, even though my daddy is the slave master, even though my daddy is one of the indentured servants that the slave master has in his house or helping me do this land, regardless, I'm black because my mama's black. That's the new rule. Before the Civil War, slaves and indentured servants were considered personal property, and they or their descendants could be sold or inherited like any other personality. Like other property, human cattle was governed largely by laws of individual states. Generally, these laws concerning indentured servants and slaves did not differentiate between the sexes. Some, however, addressed only women, regardless of their country of origin. Many early immigrants were indentured servants, people who sold their labor in exchange for passage to the New World and housing on their arrival. So that shows you that there's a difference between slavery and indentured servants. We worked, but we didn't get anything in exchange for our work. And then to be an indentured servant could have been a lifetime or usually had a span, it had a shelf life. A slave, you born a slave, you die a slave. Hmm. Initially, most laws passed concerned indentured servants, but around the middle of the 17th century, colonial laws began to reflect differences between indentured servants and slaves. More important, the laws began to differentiate between races. The association of servitude for natural life with the people of African descent became common. Negro John Punch, 1640, was one of the early cases that made a racial distinction among indentured servants. And they're still calling us indentured servants. We didn't plan to come over here. Our plan was not to come over here to work just to enjoy the fruits of the new world. Indentured slaves, yes. Hmm. Okay. John Punch was one of the early cases that made racial distinction among the indentured servants. Virginia was one of the first states to acknowledge slavery in its laws, initially enacting such a law in 1661. The following year, Virginia passed two laws that pertained solely to women who were slaves or indentured servants and to their illegitimate children. Yeah, here. Women servants who produced children by their masters could be punished by having to do 2 years of servitude with the church wardens after the expiration of the term with their masters. So, was that the servitude or was that the slaves? Hmm. The law read that each woman servant got with child by her master shall, after her time by indentured or custom is expired, to be by the church wardens of the parish where she lived when she was brought to bed of such a bastard child sold for 2 years. So that means that she had to do 2 years for the church. And let me see, a church warden.
A church warden is a lay official in a parish or congregation of the Anglican Communion, usually working as a part-time volunteer. Holders of these positions are ex officio members of the parish board, usually called the vestry, parochial church council, or in the case of a cathedral parish, the chapter.
Oh, you're going to love this one. This is the responsibility of office. Check it.
Church wardens have a duty to represent the laity and cooperate with the incumbent or, in cases of vacancy, the bishop. 1. They are expected to lead the parishioners by setting a good example and encouraging unity and peace. They have a duty to maintain order and peace in the church and churchyard at all times, and especially during services. 1. Although this task tends to be devolved to sidesmen. 2.
Huh? The second law, which concerned the birthright of children born of Negro or mulatto women, would have a profound effect on the continuance of slavery, especially after the slave trade was abolished, and on the future descendants of these women. Great Britain had a very structural system under which children always claimed the lineage to the father, even those born without the legitimacy of marriage. Virginia was one of the first colonies to legislate that changed. Negro women whose children to serve according to the condition of the mother, whereas some doubts have arisen whether children got by any Englishman upon a Negro woman would be a slave or free. Be it therefore enacted and declared by this present Grand Assembly that all children born in this country shall be held bond or free only according to the condition of the mother, and that if any Christian shall commit fornication with a Negro, man or woman, he or she so offending shall pay double the fines imposed by the former act. Most slave colonies or states enacted similar laws. After the slave trade officially ended, many slave owners tried to ensure that sufficient number of slaves were available to work their plantations. Slave women of childbearing age became more valuable. There are a number of court cases concerning slave women who killed their masters. Okay, I think I've read this before. Miscegenation laws forbidding marriages between races were prevailing in the South and West. Because English masters had little regard for indentured servants of non-Anglo ethnic groups, they allowed and sometimes encouraged commonly of their servants. Being seen, and that's a nice way of saying that they raped them. Being seen in public or bringing legitimacy to these relations, however, was not lawful. It is evidenced by court decision from 1630, the first court decision in which a Negro woman and a white man figured prominently. Davis, 1630, concerned sexual relations between them. The deciding state, Hugh Davis, to be soundly whipped for abusing himself to the dishonor of God and shame of Christianity by defiling his body in lying with a Negro, which fault he is to act next Sabbath day. Virginia passed its first miscongenial law in 1691 as part of an act of suppressing outlying slaves. So those outlying slaves were the mulattoes, the inside help. Usually were inside help, but it gets better. And for the prevention of the abominable mixture in issues which hereafter may increase in this dominion, as well by Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians intermarrying with English or other white women, as by their unlawful accompany with one another, be it enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted for the time to come, whatsoever English or other white man or woman being free shall intermarry with a Negro, mulatto, or Indian man or woman, bond or free, shall within 3 months after such marriage be banished and removed from this dominion forever. Another section of the law closed the loophole created by the 1662 birthright law, which mandated that children born of a free white mother and a Negro father were technically free. This amendment stated that a free white woman who had a bastard child by a Negro or mulatto man had to pay 15 pounds sterling within 1 month of birth. And if she could not pay, she would become an indentured servant for 5 years. Whether or not the fine was paid, however, the child would be bound in service for 30 years. Now, I told you that I was going to get to the reason why the black mothers killed their children so that they didn't end up in servitude. So even if the mother was white and the father was black and she had this baby, the baby was still a servant, no, still a slave from birth until they were 30 years old. And the mother, regardless if she paid the fine of silver or not, if she paid the fine, her child was still would be 30 before he or she would be free. If she didn't pay the fine, she became a slave, essentially a slave, for 5 years and still had her child and a slave for 30 years. The laws that restricted slaves or indentured servants generally addressed the owners and penalized them for breaking the law. Laws governing slaves allowed masters to beat or kill slaves under certain circumstances, nor could they go to court to seek redress. A person of color was not permitted to testify against a white Christian, as illustrated by the 1717 Maryland law. Number 2, be it therefore enacted by the right honorable the Lord Proprietary by and with the advice and consent of his lordship governor and the upper and lower houses of assembly, and by the authority of the same, that from and after the end of this present session of assembly, no Negro or mulatto slave, free Negro or mulatto born of a white woman during his time of servitude by law, or any Indian slave or free Indian native of this or neighboring provinces be admitted and received as good and valid evidence in law. In any matter or thing whatsoever depending before any court or court of record, or before any magistrate within this province, wherein any Christian white person is concerned. So basically, this little ditty is saying that upon my birth, my mama's white, my daddy's black, and upon my birth, for the next 30 years, I can't even go to court to petition this. This is even before I'm born. I can't even go to court and say this is wrong because I'm no good in the court. I'm no good. Receive as good and valid evidence. I'm no good. Against these overwhelming restrictions, there were a number of court cases in which slaves filed suit seeking their freedom, or free Negroes claimed property that had been inherited from their former owners. Elizabeth Freeman, a slave, presented her case for freedom in Massachusetts court proceed in 1783 and won. In addition, there were cases where the slaves or free person was the defendant. And I did this one already. Okay. The laws resulting court cases that involved slavery and indentured servants has a major impact on America, its men and women alike in both the past and the present. Through the years, the laws that the states passed became steadily more restrictive towards slaves, mulattoes, and free Negroes. In 1850, the federal government involvement deepened with the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, responding to strong lobbying efforts by slaveholders wanting to counteract the about. I can't even say this word. Maybe I can actually get the thing you say it.
Abolitionist.
Abolitionists. The Fugitive Slave Act responding to strong lobbying efforts by slaveholders wanting to counteract the abolitionist forces. In the face of all of these all-encompassing laws, women with extraordinary courage fought for the better life. For example, Harriet Tubman, 1821 to 1913, returned to the South 19 times to bring more than 300 fugitives to freedom. And Charlotte Fortin, from 1837 to 1914, a free black woman from Philadelphia went to South Carolina during the early Civil War to teach the contrabands of war, slaves who had escaped to the Union lines. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution ended slavery and involuntary servitude. Nevertheless, many laws and judicial precedents that had been established before that date would not be changed until the mid or late 20th century. I just wanted to share that information because it gives us a better view of why things are the way they are. It doesn't make anything better unless we actually know why things are. And then we can actually make a conscious effort to make a choice. And those choices would change where we are mentally. Because right now, Black history, for me, is a reminder of how far we have come, but how far we need to go. We still have miles to go before we sleep, miles to go. And it seems as if some of us who, quote unquote, think that they have made it look at this situation differently. Not to say that it's good, bad, or indifferent. They look at this situation differently. But I don't think that we as a people have made it until the majority of us have made it. Until the majority of us are not dependent on this government to supply us with our needs. Until we can petition the government to give us what it is that we need in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods, in our own. We've had Black Wall Street. And after the burning and the killing that happened, we no longer even try. Now we have technology. Now we have media that goes worldwide in minutes, seconds. Now we can bring to light the wrongs and pass legislation, but we have to stick together and we have to know what that history is and why it is. And knowing these things will help us. I'm not saying going back to open up scars because, like I said, these scars have never healed. but perhaps we can heal them ourselves, not depending on an apology, not depending on the government to give us money. Reparation, that ain't gonna happen. They would go broke. That's not gonna happen. They would rather bail out companies that hurt our economy rather than to help us build an economy. And it's time for us to start waking up, folks. All of this information is in your back pocket. All of this information is on the phone that you spend so much for. All of this information is in the media. We have the opportunity to gather all these things and become smarter and become more aware, not just for today, but why it happened back then and why the mentality is different. We have that responsibility to ourselves, but yet still we're using the internet for Facebook to be entertained for hours on end. It's our responsibility and it's out there. It's not like it's in a book in a library that I can't go into. You have that responsibility just like I do. We're all responsible for ourselves. Get this information and don't make it hate. Don't make it a situation where you are hating the white people. No. Use this information to make you stronger. Pass this information on. Because I don't really think that the generation now even knows what Black history is. It's fleeting. We have a full 30 days to tell the world, but we're not even teaching ourselves. And it's here. And it's not for someone else to teach us, it's for us to teach ourselves and teach our loved ones. This is not propaganda. This is not because I hate white people. It's because I love me. I love you. I love people who look like me, people who act like me, people who have been through the same thing that I've been through. So for me to say Black power is to say that I love being Black. I love being me. And I like people who look like me. But we have a responsibility that we're not using. We walk around with all this Snapchat and the latest apps and this, that, and the other. And there is a community of books. There's community of knowledge. There is community of free stuff, free information that we have access to. And it's not just here in America. We have access to the information all over the world. And we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our children and to our children's children and to generations to come and generations past to get this information and use it. I'll be back with some more stuff. And hopefully I can get a little bit more interesting. But right now I'm just finding out how to do this. And if there's a topic that you would like to know about, I will research it for you so that you don't have to read it. I'll read it to you. I'll put it in audio. You don't have to watch this ugly mug. But I want you to know it. I want you to know it without a shadow of a doubt. And I will recite my resources, any resources. I can't remember where I got that from, but I will, from here on out, recite all of my resources. I will tell you exactly where it's from. Almost like me writing a paper. However, you're listening to a video. because I want you to be more informed about who you are so that you know where you can go and you can understand that you're the only one holding yourself back.